The year was 2347, and humanity believed they were alone in the universe. They had spread across 12 colony worlds. They had built cities on distant moons. They had created a civilization that stretched across the stars, and they were proud of what they had become. That pride died on a Tuesday morning. Admiral Daniel Price stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the massive alien vessels emerge from the darkness of space. There were hundreds of them. Each ship was larger than anything humanity had ever built. They hung in the black void like metal mountains, blocking out the stars themselves. The message came minutes later. It was translated into perfect English, though the voice was cold and inhuman. People of Earth, we are the Dominion. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. We have conquered 100 species. All of them now serve us. You will do the same. Send your leaders to our command vessel. You have 12 hours to submit. If you refuse, you will be harvested. Admiral Price was 62 years old. He had served in the fleet for 40 years. He had seen many things in his life, but he had never felt fear like this. The alien ships were so powerful that Earth's entire fleet would be destroyed in minutes if they chose to fight. He sent a message to the United Earth government. They responded within the hour. They would send diplomats. They would try to negotiate. Perhaps there was a way to avoid war. Ambassador Monroe was chosen for the mission. She was 45 years old, a former professor who had spent her career studying conflict resolution. She believed that all intelligent beings could find common ground if they simply talked to each other. She was wrong. Boarded the diplomatic vessel Horizon's Edge along with her aide, Lieutenant Sam. Sam was young, only 28, but he was smart and brave. He had volunteered for the mission when no one else would. The flight to the command ship took 3 hours. Spent the time reviewing everything humanity knew about the aliens, which was almost nothing. They had appeared without warning. Their technology was far beyond anything humans possessed, and their message had been clear: submit or die. When the Horizon's Edge docked with the alien vessel, felt her heart beating fast. The airlock opened, and she stepped into a world that was not meant for human eyes. The ship was dark and hot. The walls seemed to breathe. Strange smells filled the air, like rotting meat mixed with something sweet. Forced herself to keep walking. They were led through twisting corridors by creatures that looked like insects standing upright. Each one was 7 feet tall, with black armor covering their bodies and eyes that glowed a faint red. They did not speak. They did not even look at the humans. They simply walked. Finally, they reached a massive chamber. At the center sat the Supreme Arbiter, the leader of the Dominion. Was enormous. He stood nearly 10 feet tall when he rose from his throne. His body was covered in thick plates of natural armor, dark green and glistening. His face had no expression that could read. Multiple arms extended from his torso, each one ending in claws that could tear through steel. "You are the leaders of humanity?" asked. His voice came through a translation device around his neck. "I am Ambassador Monroe," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I represent the people of Earth. We come in peace, hoping to establish friendly relations between our species." Made a sound that might have been laughter. Peace, friendly relations. These words mean nothing to us. You are prey, we are predators. This is the natural order of the galaxy. Felt Sam tense beside her, but she kept her composure. "With respect, Supreme Arbiter, humanity does not see itself as prey. We are a peaceful species, but we are not weak. Perhaps we can find an arrangement that benefits both our peoples." An arrangement? Leaned forward, his red eyes fixed on her. "Here is your arrangement. You will sign a document surrendering your species to the Dominion. Your people will serve us. Your worlds will feed us. Your children will work in our mines and factories. In return, we will allow some of you to live." Stared at him. "You cannot be serious." "I am always serious," replied. "Every species we have conquered has accepted these terms. The ones who refused are now extinct. Choose wisely, human." For a long moment said nothing. She thought about her home on Earth. She thought about her parents who still lived in a small town in Ohio. She thought about all the billions of people counting on her to save them. And then she spoke. "No." The chamber went silent. Even the insect guard seemed to freeze. "No," repeated, as if he had never heard the word before. "No," said again. "Humanity will not surrender. We will not be slaves. We will not give you our children. If you want war, you will have it, but we will never kneel." Stared at her for a long time. Then he raised one of his clawed arms and made a gesture. The guards moved fast. Before could react, they had grabbed her and Sam. She screamed as claws tore into her flesh. She saw Sam fighting back, punching and kicking, but it was useless. The aliens were too strong. But Sam did something they did not expect. Even as they held him, he activated the emergency transmitter on his wrist. It was connected directly to Admiral Price's flagship. "They killed her," Sam shouted into the device, his voice breaking. "Burn them all." Then the transmission cut to static. Admiral Price received the message on his bridge. He played it 3 times, listening to Sam's final words. Around him, his officers stood in shocked silence. "Sir," one of them said quietly, "what do we do?" Before Price could answer, new reports began flooding in. The fleet had opened fire on 3 human colony worlds: New Helsinki, Prosperity Station, Haven's Rest. 800 million people lived on those worlds. The footage arrived minutes later. Cities burning, people running through the streets screaming, children crying for parents they would never see again. The aliens were not just attacking, they were slaughtering, they were enjoying it. The broadcast the destruction across every frequency, letting all of humanity watch. They wanted humans to see what happened to those who refused to submit. They wanted terror. They wanted surrender. Instead, they got silence. Admiral Price watched the footage of Haven's Rest burning. He saw a little girl, no more than 6 years old, running through flames before she disappeared in a blast of alien weapons fire. Something inside him changed in that moment. Something old and dark and terrible woke up behind his eyes. He opened a channel to every human ship, station, and colony in existence. His voice was calm, too calm. "They think we are prey," he said. "They think we will beg for mercy. They think we will surrender our children to save ourselves. They are wrong. They do not know what we are. They do not know what we become when someone hurts our families." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was like ice. "We will not negotiate. We will not forgive. We will not stop until every single one of them understands what it means to make humanity angry. And when this war is over, the galaxy will speak our name in whispers. They will tell stories of what we did to those who murdered our children, and they will be afraid." He ended the transmission and turned to his officers. "Begin preparations. We are going to war." The humans did not respond for 6 months. The galaxy thought they were broken. The galaxy was wrong. For 6 months, they waited for humanity to surrender. They had seen this pattern 100 times before. A species would resist at first, full of pride and anger. Then, after watching their worlds burn, they would break. They would send messengers begging for peace. They would agree to any terms. But no messengers came from Earth. They found this strange, but they were not worried. They began harvesting operations on the fallen colony worlds. Human survivors were collected and transported to work camps. Scientists were taken for biological study. Children were separated from parents and shipped to distant facilities. Supreme Arbiter believed the war was already over. Humanity was simply too proud to admit defeat. In time, they would understand their place. He could not have been more wrong. On Earth, something extraordinary was happening. For the first time in human history, every nation, every company, every individual was working toward a single goal. Politicians who had spent decades fighting each other now sat at the same tables, planning together. Factories that had once made cars now made weapons. Universities that had studied art and philosophy now designed warships. General Chris was placed in charge of the new military. He was 54 years old, a quiet man with gray hair and cold blue eyes. He had fought in small wars on Earth before the age of space travel. He understood something that they did not. Humans were never more dangerous than when they had nothing left to lose. He created the Unified Terran Defense Force. Every able person between 18 and 50 was eligible for service. 20 million volunteered in the first week alone. They did not need to be convinced. They had all seen the footage from the colonies. They had all lost someone. His doctrine was simple. No mercy, no negotiation, no prisoners. This was not a war for territory or resources. This was a war for survival, and survival meant destroying the enemy completely. While built the army, Dr. Laura Keene built the weapons. Laura was 41 years old, a physicist from Chicago who had spent her career studying energy and matter. She was quiet and serious, the kind of woman who preferred equations to conversation. But when the bombs fell on New Helsinki, something inside her changed. Her daughter Emma had been on New Helsinki. She was 19 years old, a college student studying medicine. She had wanted to help people. She had believed the universe was basically good. Laura received confirmation of Emma's death 3 days after the attack. She did not cry. She did not scream. She simply walked into her laboratory and began working on something new. The other scientists called it the Hellfire Protocol. It was a series of weapons designed not just to kill, but to terrify. Plasma bombs that could turn cities to glass. Biological agents that targeted specific alien species. Radiation weapons that would poison worlds for centuries. Some of Laura's colleagues objected. They said these weapons were too cruel. They said humanity should not become monsters to fight monsters. Laura looked at them with empty eyes. "They killed my daughter," she said. "They killed 800 million of our people, and you want to talk about cruelty? There is no cruelty great enough for what I am going to do to them." She returned to her work. No one objected again. The shipyards were hidden in asteroid belts across the solar system. Thousands of workers lived in underground stations, building vessels in secret. They had no idea these facilities existed. They believed humanity had only a few hundred ships, old and weak compared to Dominion technology. In 6 months, humanity built 300 warships. They were smaller than vessels, but faster and more heavily armed. Each one carried weapons that would make the galaxy tremble. Admiral Daniel Price commanded the new fleet from his flagship, the Unconquered Will. He had not slept more than 4 hours a night since the war began. His hair had turned completely white. His hands sometimes shook when he thought about what was coming. But his resolve never wavered. On the day of the attack, he gathered his captains for one final briefing. They stood in a circle around a holographic map showing space. At the center was Nexus Prime, the Dominion's command station. 2 million aliens lived there. It was the heart of their government. "We will strike without warning," Price said. "We will not announce ourselves. We will not give them time to respond. When we arrive, we will open fire immediately and continue firing until nothing remains. Is that understood?" The captains nodded. None of them smiled. None of them looked happy. They understood what they were about to do. They were not soldiers anymore. They were executioners. "Good," Price said. "Prepare your ships. We launch in 6 hours." The jump to space took 12 hours. The human fleet traveled in complete radio silence. No signals, no communication, just 300 ships moving through the darkness like ghosts. When they emerged from hyperspace near Nexus Prime, they detected them immediately. But they were not worried. They had thousands of ships. They had the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. They had conquered 100 species. They sent a message to the human fleet. "Surrender now, and we will make your deaths quick." Admiral Price did not respond. He simply gave the order. Open fire. 300 human ships unleashed everything they had. Plasma rounds tore through vessels. Missiles carrying Laura Keene's special warheads exploded against the station's shields. The darkness of space lit up with fire. They fought back, but they were confused. They had expected humans to be weak. They had expected outdated weapons and poor tactics. Instead, they faced an enemy that was faster, smarter, and more determined than anything they had encountered. The battle lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, Nexus Prime was gone. 2 million were dead. The command station that had governed their empire for thousands of years was nothing but radioactive debris floating in the void. Admiral Price stood on his bridge and watched the wreckage drift past his windows. Around him, his officers were silent. Some were crying. Others looked sick. They had won, but victory felt hollow. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "what do we do now?" Price was silent for a long moment. He thought about Monroe, murdered in a chamber. He thought about Sam's final words. He thought about all the children who had died on New Helsinki and Prosperity Station and Haven's Rest. "Send a message to their remaining worlds," he said. "Tell them this is just the beginning. Tell them we are coming for all of them. Tell them there is nowhere in the galaxy where they can hide from us." He turned away from the window. "And tell them we remember our dead." The message was transmitted across every frequency. It was received on dozens of worlds, in hundreds of stations, by millions of aliens who had believed themselves invincible. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Dominion knew fear. On Earth, the news of the victory spread quickly. People gathered in the streets, but there was no celebration. They had won a battle, not the war, and everyone knew what was coming next. General addressed the troops in a brief statement. "Today we proved that we can fight. Tomorrow we prove that we can win. The enemy still has thousands of ships. They still control most of the galaxy. But they now know something they did not know before. We are not prey. We are the hunters, and we will not stop until every last one of them pays for what they did." Dr. Laura Keene said nothing. She was already in her laboratory, working on new weapons. She had promised herself that she would not rest until they burned as bright as New Helsinki had burned. She intended to keep that promise. Admiral Price remained with the fleet, preparing for the next assault. He wrote letters to the families of the fallen, hundreds of them, each one by hand. He did not sleep. He did not eat. He simply worked. When asked by a reporter how he felt about the destruction of Nexus Prime, he gave a simple answer. "I feel nothing," he said, "and that frightens me more than the enemy ever could." The war had only just begun, and already humanity was changing into something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that would be remembered forever. Something terrible. The war spread across the galaxy like a fire that could not be controlled. Human fleets struck positions without warning, without mercy, without any of the rules that civilized species were supposed to follow. And the methods they used made the galaxy sick with horror. Captain Bate was 36 years old. Before the war, she had been a history teacher in Arizona. She had taught children about ancient civilizations, about how humanity had grown from violent tribes into a peaceful society. She had believed in progress. She had believed that violence was a thing of the past. Now she commanded a special operations unit called the Reapers. The Reapers did not fight like soldiers. They fought like ghosts. They infiltrated worlds in small teams, moving through shadows, striking targets that had nothing to do with military strategy. They destroyed temples where their ancestors. They killed spiritual leaders who had never held a weapon. They poisoned water supplies and left entire cities dying slowly. And they did something else, something that made even hardened military officers look away in shame. When they had bombed human colonies, they had broadcast the destruction for all to see. They had shown human children burning, human families screaming, human cities turning to ash. They had wanted humanity to know fear. Bate remembered those broadcasts. She remembered watching them with tears running down her face, and she decided that they would learn what fear truly meant. Her teams began capturing young, not soldiers, children. They did not harm them, not physically, but they recorded their screaming as they watched recordings of their own cities being destroyed by human weapons. They captured the sounds of alien children crying for parents who would never come. And they broadcast those sounds across every frequency, every hour, every day. They made us listen to our children dying, Bate explained to a reporter who asked about the tactic. Now they can listen to theirs. Maybe then they will understand what they did to us. The reporter looked at her with horror in his eyes. But those are children, innocent children. Bate stared at him for a long moment. Her face showed no emotion at all. So were ours. She walked away, and the reporter did not follow. The Galactic Council watched these events with growing alarm. The Council was a neutral body of 12 species who had avoided the war, believing themselves too powerful to be threatened. They had watched the attack humanity without lifting a finger to help. They had called for peace and negotiation while human worlds burned. Now they saw what humanity had become, and they were afraid. They summoned a human ambassador to address the Council. The United Earth government sent. Was 49 years old, a former diplomat who had spent decades negotiating trade agreements and peace treaties. He was known for his calm manner and reasonable approach to problems. The Council believed he would listen to their concerns and agree to moderate humanity's methods. They were wrong. Walked into the Council chamber wearing a simple black suit. Around him, 12 alien species watched from elevated platforms. Some were massive creatures of stone and metal. Others were small beings of light and energy. All of them believed themselves superior to the young species called humanity. The lead arbiter, a being of pure crystal named, spoke first. Ambassador, the Galactic Council has observed the war between humanity and with great concern. While we acknowledge that the struck first, the methods your species now employs are unacceptable. You are violating every standard of civilized warfare. You are targeting civilians. You are destroying cultural sites. You are committing acts that can only be described as barbaric. Listened without expression. When finished, he stepped forward. May I respond? You may. Looked around the chamber slowly, meeting the eyes of every species represented. You call our methods barbaric, he said. Let me tell you about barbarism. When they came to our system, they demanded our surrender. When we refused, they murdered our diplomats. They bombed 3 of our colony worlds. They killed 800 million of our people, including children, including elderly, including people who had never harmed anyone. His voice remained calm, but something cold crept into it. And while they did this, where was the Galactic Council? Did you send ships to help us? Did you condemn the attack? Did you offer medical aid to the survivors? Silence filled the chamber. No, continued. You did nothing. You watched our people die and you called for peace. You asked us to negotiate with the creatures who were wearing the skin of our dead as trophies. You expected us to accept slavery to avoid inconveniencing your precious galactic order. He stepped closer to the central platform. And now, after we refused to die, after we fought back with everything we had, you dare to lecture us about methods. You dare to call us barbaric. Shifted uncomfortably. Ambassador, please understand. The Council has always maintained neutrality in conflicts between species. It is not our place to interfere. Neutrality, repeated, and for the first time his calm mask slipped. Anger flashed in his eyes. Neutrality is just another word for cowardice. You watched children burn because it was easier than taking sides, and now you expect us to care about your opinions. He turned to address all the assembled species. Let me make something very clear. Humanity did not ask for this war. We would have been happy to live in peace, trading with other species, exploring the galaxy together. But they taught us something. They taught us that peace means nothing to predators. They taught us that mercy is a weakness that gets children killed. His voice hardened. So we learned new lessons. We learned how to be predators ourselves. We learned how to make our enemies fear us so deeply that they will never again think of us as prey. And yes, we learned these methods from them. We simply proved to be better students. He paused, letting his words sink in. The Council has two choices. You can stay neutral as you have always done and we will leave you alone. Or you can aid and you will become our enemies. There is no third option. There is no negotiation. There is no compromise. Spoke again, his crystalline form pulsing with agitation. You cannot threaten the Council. We have resources, weapons, that humanity cannot imagine. Smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You have resources and weapons, yes, but do you have the will to use them? Do you have the stomach for what war against humanity would mean? We have already shown what we do to those who harm us. They killed 800 million of our people, and we have killed 2 billion of theirs in response. We have burned their worlds. We have shattered their fleets. We have made them afraid to sleep at night. He looked directly at. Is that what you want for your species? Is that what any of you want? The chamber was completely silent. Not a single species raised their voice. Nodded, I thought not. We are leaving now. The Council can issue whatever statements it likes. We will not be listening. He turned and walked toward the exit. Before he reached the door, he stopped and looked back one final time. One more thing. The next time a species asks for your help against an aggressor, remember this day. Remember how you did nothing when humanity begged for protection. And remember that the galaxy now contains a species that will never beg again. We will never ask for help. We will never trust anyone to protect us. We learned that lesson too. He left the chamber without another word. The Council sat in stunned silence for a long time after he was gone. Finally spoke. What have we done? He asked quietly. What kind of monster have we helped create? No one had an answer. In the weeks that followed, the Council issued a formal statement of neutrality. They did not condemn humanity's methods. They did not aid They simply watched from the sidelines as the war continued to escalate. And across the galaxy, other species took note. They saw what humanity did to its enemies. They saw how the Galactic Council had been silenced with nothing but words and cold determination. They began to understand something important. Humanity was not just fighting a war. Humanity was teaching the galaxy a lesson. And the lesson was simple: never touch our children. The cost of that lesson was still being counted, and it would be counted for generations to come. 3 years into the war, the Dominion began to break apart. For 10,000 years, the Dominion had held 7 species together through fear. They were the strongest, the oldest, the most powerful. Other species served them because the alternative was extinction. They had no choice. But now there was a new power in the galaxy, a species that had done something no one believed possible. They had made the afraid. And if they could be afraid, then perhaps they could be defeated. They were the first to defect. They were an aquatic species, beings of blue flesh and silver eyes who lived in vast ocean worlds. Thousands of years ago, they had conquered them and forced them into the Dominion. They had served as engineers and scientists, building weapons they hated for masters they despised. Their leader, a female named, sent a secret message to Admiral Daniel Price. She offered intelligence, fleet movements, supply routes, weapon weaknesses. Everything they knew about the Dominion was now available to humanity. In exchange, she asked for only one thing: freedom. Price accepted the offer. He did not trust them completely, but he understood something important. The Dominion was not a unified enemy. It was a collection of slaves held together by fear. and fear could be turned against the masters just as easily as against the slaves. The intelligence they provided changed everything. General Chris used it to plan the largest offensive of the war, the Battle of Shadowed Reaches. Shadowed Reaches was a region of space filled with dust clouds and dying stars. It was difficult to navigate, easy to hide in, and strategically vital. Whoever controlled Shadowed Reaches controlled the main route between human space and They sent 400 warships to secure the region. They believed this force was more than enough to crush any human attack. They outnumbered humanity 2-1. Commander Meg led the human fleet. She was 38 years old, the daughter of factory workers from Detroit. Before the war, she had been a freighter captain, hauling cargo between colony worlds. Now she commanded 200 warships and the lives of 50,000 soldiers. She had lost her entire family when the bombed Prosperity Station. Her parents, her brother, her young niece, all of them gone in a flash of alien fire. She had watched the footage of the bombing so many times that she saw it in her dreams. Now she was going to make the pay. The battle began at dawn local time. The human fleet emerged from the dust clouds where they had been hiding, catching them by surprise. Meg's ship struck fast and hard, targeting command vessels and communication stations first. They responded with overwhelming firepower. Plasma beams sliced through space. Missiles exploded against shields. Human ships began to die. But Meg had a plan. She had studied the intelligence from the carefully. She knew that commanders followed strict protocols, never adapting to unexpected situations. They were trained to follow orders, not to think for themselves. So she gave them something they had never seen before. Halfway through the battle, when they believed they were winning, 50 human ships broke away from the main fleet. They flew directly at the largest vessel, the command dreadnought carrying the enemy admiral. They laughed at this foolish attack. 50 ships against their greatest weapon. It was suicide. And then the 50 ships exploded. They were not warships. They were bombs. Each one carried enough explosive power to destroy a small moon. They had been piloted by volunteers who knew they would not survive. The command dreadnought vanished in a ball of fire that could be seen across the system. The enemy admiral died without ever understanding what had happened. With their leadership gone, the fleet fell into chaos. Ships began firing at random, some even hitting their own allies. Commanders screamed for orders that never came. Meg's voice came over all frequencies, calm and cold. "Attention vessels, your admiral is dead. Your command structure is destroyed. You have 2 choices, surrender or die. You have 30 seconds to decide." Some ships surrendered, most did not. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it ended, not a single ship remained operational. 400 vessels destroyed. Over 1 million enemy soldiers dead. Meg broadcast a final message before leaving the system. "We are coming for Prime. Run if you wish. It will not help." Back on Earth, the victory was celebrated, but the celebrations felt hollow. The war had changed human society in ways that could never be reversed. Children grew up learning to hate. Schools taught not just reading and mathematics, but also military tactics and the history of crimes. The names of the fallen colonies were repeated every morning like prayers. New Helsinki, Prosperity Station, Haven's Rest. Monuments covered every city, statues of the dead, walls inscribed with names, gardens planted in memory of children who would never grow up. And in secret laboratories, Dr. Laura Keene continued her work. She had created weapons that could destroy cities, weapons that could poison worlds, weapons that made the afraid to sleep. But she was not satisfied. She wanted something more, something that would ensure no species ever threatened humanity again. She called it the Omega device. The science was simple in theory, impossible in practice. A device that could destabilize a star, causing it to explode and consume everything in its system. One weapon that could destroy an entire civilization in minutes. When Laura presented the device to Admiral Price and General, the room fell silent. "This is madness," one of the generals whispered. "This weapon could kill billions." Laura looked at him with empty eyes. "They killed 800 million of our people. This weapon will ensure they never kill anyone again." "But we would become monsters," the general protested. "We would become worse than them." Admiral Price spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, tired. "We are already monsters," he said. "We became monsters the day we decided to survive at any cost. The only question now is whether we are monsters with limits or monsters without them." He looked at Laura. "Build the device, but we will not use it unless we have no other choice. Let it be our last resort, not our first weapon." Laura nodded. She returned to her laboratory and continued working. The Omega device was completed 3 months later. It sat in a secure facility, waiting, a weapon of final destruction, a promise of total annihilation. Some officers wanted to use it immediately. They argued that destroying the would end the war in a single stroke. Why let more humans die when victory could be guaranteed? But Price refused, not because he believed the deserved mercy. He had lost that belief long ago. He refused because he wanted them to know they had been defeated. He wanted them to feel the same terror humanity had felt when the bombs fell on New Helsinki. A quick death was too easy. He wanted them to watch their empire crumble, piece by piece, until nothing remained but ashes and memories. And so the war continued. Human fleets pushed deeper into enemy territory. Worlds fell one by one. The Dominion, which had ruled for 10,000 years, was dying. And in the darkness between the stars, a question began to form in the minds of every species watching. What would humanity become when the war was over? The galaxy was afraid to find out. The final assault on Prime began on a morning that would be remembered forever. Admiral Daniel Price stood on the bridge of the unconquered Will and watched the enemy grow larger in his viewport. It was a beautiful planet, green and blue and golden, orbiting a yellow star. For 8,000 years, no enemy had touched its surface. It was the heart of an empire, a symbol of unbreakable power. Today, that symbol would die. The human fleet numbered 500 warships. They had come from every corner of Earth's territory, carrying soldiers who had been fighting for 4 long years. Many of them had lost families in the first attacks. All of them had lost friends in the battles that followed. They were tired, they were broken, and they were absolutely determined to finish what they had started. The battle for Prime lasted 17 days. They fought with everything they had. Their remaining fleet, their orbital stations, their ground defenses. They threw millions of soldiers into the fight, knowing that defeat meant extinction. But humanity had learned the art of war better than any species in galactic history. They had studied every battle, analyzed every tactic, corrected every mistake. They fought with cold precision and absolute focus. On the 3rd day, the orbital stations fell. On the 7th day, the last warship was destroyed. On the 12th day, human soldiers landed on the surface and began the ground assault. The cities of Prime burned. Ancient temples crumbled. Libraries containing 10,000 years of history were reduced to ash. The population fled before the advancing human forces, but there was nowhere to run. On the 17th day, Supreme Arbiter requested a ceasefire. Admiral Price agreed to meet him on the surface, in the ruins of what had once been the capital city. He brought 50 soldiers as guards, though he knew they would not be needed. The war was over. Everyone knew it. Waited in the center of a destroyed plaza. He was ancient, wounded, covered in scars from a dozen battles. His once proud armor was cracked and stained with blood. He stood alone, without guards or advisors. Price approached him slowly. The two leaders faced each other across a gap of 20 feet. "Admiral Price," said through his translation device. His voice was weak, tired. "You have won. My species is defeated. Our empire is destroyed. Everything we built over 10,000 years is gone." Price said nothing. He simply waited. Continued, his red eyes searching the human's face for something he could understand. "I must ask you a question, one that has haunted me since this war began. Why did your species choose this path? We have conquered 100 species over our history, all of them submitted, all of them accepted their place in the natural order, but your kind chose annihilation over survival. You chose to die rather than kneel. Why?" Price was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was flat without emotion. "Because you killed our children." "We have killed children of many species," said. "None of them responded as you did." "Then you understand nothing about humanity." Price stepped closer, close enough to see the fear in the alien's eyes. "When you came to our system, you saw a young species. You saw primitive technology and small fleets. You thought we were animals to be harvested. You thought we would behave like every other species you had conquered." He shook his head slowly. "You were wrong. You did not understand what we are. Humans are not civilized. We wear civilization like clothing, a thin layer over something ancient and dark. For thousands of years, we fought each other. We killed and conquered and destroyed. We learned how to make war better than any species in the galaxy." His voice dropped lower. "And then we stopped. We built peaceful societies. We created art and music and philosophy. We convinced ourselves that we had our violent past. We believed we were better than we used to be." He looked at the ruins surrounding them. "But we were not better. We had simply forgotten. When you took our children from us, when you broadcast their deaths as entertainment, you stripped away our civilization. You reminded us what we really are." He leaned close too. "And now you know. Now the entire galaxy knows. We are not prey. We are not peaceful. We are not civilized. We are monsters wearing human faces. And when someone hurts our families, we become worse monsters than our enemies could ever imagine." Lowered his head. "What happens now?" "Now you surrender. Your species will be confined to 3 worlds under permanent human supervision. You will never again build warships or weapons. You will never again travel beyond your system without permission. And you will teach your children and their children and every generation that follows what happens to those who harm humanity." "And if we refuse?" Price looked at him with empty eyes. "Then I give the order and your star goes dark. Your entire system dies in nuclear fire. Every single member of your species is erased from existence." He paused. "I have that weapon. I have the ability to kill billions with a single command. And after what your kind did to us, I would feel nothing if I used it. Nothing at all." Stared at him for a long time. Then slowly, the ancient alien lowered himself to his knees. "We surrender," he said. "We accept your terms." The war was over. But the consequences of that war would echo across the galaxy forever. In the years that followed, the Galactic Council formally recognized Earth as a major power, but no ambassador would meet human eyes during negotiations. Trade was conducted through intermediaries. Requests were phrased as humble petitions rather than demands. When a human warship entered any system, all communication ceased. Ships powered down their weapons. Stations went dark. Species that had ruled for hid like frightened children when human vessels passed by. No one wanted to give humanity a reason to remember they existed. In the archives of the Galactic Council, a new entry was added to the Encyclopedia of Sentient Species. Under the section on humanity, a single warning was inscribed in every known language. They are not cruel by nature. They are not conquerors by choice. But when provoked, when their loved ones are threatened, they become something that even death learns to fear. Do not mistake their kindness for weakness. Do not mistake their patience for submission. And above all, never, ever harm their children, for they will follow you to the ends of the universe, burn everything you love to ash, and make you watch before they grant you the mercy of oblivion. The galaxy now knew peace, but it was a peace born of terror. And in the silence between the stars, humanity's name was spoken only in whispers. 10 years after the war ended, Admiral Daniel Price retired to a quiet farm in Montana. He grew vegetables. He watched the sunset each evening. Sometimes old soldiers visited, and they sat together without speaking, sharing the weight of memories too heavy for words. One night, a young reporter found him and asked how he felt about what humanity had become during those terrible years. Price sat in his rocking chair and looked up at the stars for a long time. "We did what we had to do," he said finally. "We became something terrible because the alternative was extinction. I do not ask for forgiveness. I do not expect understanding. I only hope that somewhere in the galaxy there is a child who sleeps safely because monsters like me were willing to become worse monsters than our enemies." He closed his eyes. "That is the burden we carry. That is the price we paid, and God help me, I would pay it again." The reporter left without another word. Some stories have no heroes, only survivors. Dr. Laura Keene never spoke publicly about her role in the war. She returned to teaching physics at a university, though her students said her eyes were always somewhere else. She died peacefully in her sleep 20 years later. Her last words, spoken to a nurse who barely heard them, were her daughter's name, Emma. General Chris wrote a memoir that became required reading in military academies across the galaxy. In it, he described the transformation of humanity from a peaceful species to the most feared force in known space. The final chapter was titled simply, "The Cost." Commander Meg became the first human ambassador to the reformed Galactic Council. She spent the rest of her life trying to build bridges between humanity and the species that feared them. She was largely unsuccessful. The galaxy remembered too well what humanity was capable of. Captain Bate disappeared after the war. Some said she could not live with what she had done. Others said she was still out there somewhere, waiting for the next enemy to threaten her species. No one knew the truth. And on Prime, the surviving lived under human supervision, teaching their children the lesson they had learned too late. Never touch humanity, never threaten their families, never make them remember what they truly are. Because if you do, there is nowhere in the universe where you can hide from them. They will find you, they will break you, and they will make the galaxy remember their name for eternity. In dread and silence. Forever.